and northern Florida and Georgia, and this is coming from that area. It was somewhere between the beginning of time and the end of time. Okay, it was a little closer to the end of time. But I can't say for sure because I have been to St. Augustine, Florida. Y'all know what's in St. Augustine, Florida, right? That's right. I have drunk from the fountain of youth. I have. I'm not making this up. I stood in line for over an hour. I paid $11 for the experience. And that was with the AAA discount. Now, I am not making this up. The water from the fountain of youth was actually served to me in a disposable cup by a well-tanned teenager in a red and gold conquistador outfit. I didn't think about it much until later that afternoon. I was at my friend's place in the suburbs and we were sitting around his swimming pool. And I'm not making this up. There was that same kid, still wearing the red and gold conquistador outfit, sunning himself in the water. He was held afloat by a life-sized inflatable alligator. Its tail wrapped around one side of him and his mouth around the other, and in its snout was a yellow beer koozie maintaining an ice-cold Corona. I'm making this shit up. This kid seemed to be one of those people who never gets off work, as if he actually enjoyed being employed by the Chamber of Commerce. Or maybe he posted his list of hobbies to one of those online job searches like Monster.com, and he actually thought that this was going to be a good idea for the rest of his life. Welcome to St. Augustine, he said, the oldest city in the North America. Why, it was here that Ponce de Leon and I searched for the fountain of youth. I was only 19 years old at the time. This guy's taking his character a little too far, I thought. Sort of like George Bush thinking he really did win the election in 2000. But that's a different story. Most people think that the fountain of youth is just this foolish Indian myth. I don't, I thought. Why else would they buy all those ads for minoxidil and Viagra and silicone breast implants? As for me, I keep my Viagra right next to my Prozac. But you know, if either one of them worked, I wouldn't need the other one. There seems to be some sort of a language barrier, because the Calusa Indians were not talking about a fountain of youth that can melt away cellulite or prevent gingivitis. They were talking about the youth of the species, not the individual. It's why when the Spanish first came here in search of decent Indian food, and also in search of fresh slaves, the free African sailors that came with them started putting two and two together, that hostile Indians who knew the territory better than they didn't make such good slaves. So they built a fort for their own protection, adjacent to the famous Spanish fort. Yes, my friends, the first blacks in America were not slaves. And the first American slaves were not black. And this is well before Plymouth Rock landed on the Indians. Mention that the next time you meet some Boston blue blood boasting of how long ago his ancestors on the Mayflower arrived here. There seems to be something in the water in St. Augustine, Florida, he explained, as he leisurely paddled across the swimming pool, still held afloat by the life-sized inflatable alligator. And those African slaves I mentioned before, they knew this too, because they adopted Christian stories about following the drinking gourd or crossing the river of eternal life, or at least crossing from slave territories into free ones. I personally find it ironic that the mythology of their captors helped these slaves escape the mythology of their captors. But let me tell you, when Colonel Sanders, who was settling just north of there, heard about free black people living in their own community, tried to put a stop to it. Remember what he did? He hired a guy by the name of Andrew Jackson. But let me tell you, Colonel Sanders' faithful family retainers teamed up with a Florida State Seminole, and Colonel Jackson was forced to surrender while slinking back to Washington, D.C. to declare victory and later become president. It's not the only time that defeat in Florida has led to becoming president, but that's a different story. As for the Seminole, they remain unconquered to this day. Think about that the next time you go down to Hollywood, Florida and feed one of those green pictures of Andrew Jackson into a slot machine. Perhaps the casinos are the Indians' way of paying white people back for bringing them the 40-ouncer. I wondered why he hadn't mentioned that back in the tourist trap. Now, I'm not going to stand up here and bore you guys on a Friday night about all the details about the first slaves to be freed by the Emancipation Proclamation, or the first big race riots that eventually led to the end of segregation, all happening in St. Augustine, Florida. I'll just tell you that it happened. And that in the end, a man named after Martin Luther had a dream that eventually came true. That's not to say that he was the only one that had that dream, or that the present is particularly auspicious. Because right now, tonight, there are far too many descendants of those African slaves working minimum wage jobs, using the very water from the fountain of youth just to water the emerald lawns of the Ponce de Leon Golf and Conference Center. But let me tell you, it's a glass half empty, half full question, to which I say, get a smaller glass. There are millions of problems in this world. A million of them right here, right now. But you know what that means? You know what that means? It means there are a million answers, a million voices, and a million dreams. And every dream does come true. I'm sitting here watching Waking Life while I'm reciting this poetry. It's true. Every dream does come true, but it's all in the way you interpret it. Ponce de Leon, too, had a dream. He just didn't interpret his the right way. And his dream, his interpretation wound up getting him killed about 100 miles south of St. Augustine. And 100 miles south of St. Augustine, in a place you and I know as Cape Canaveral, the roosters say it best. They begin crowing as roosters do. But the thing is, the dawn is not yet upon us. Yet the whole horizon blooms at once. A misty blue light fills our lungs as the horizon hurls yellow rage across the water's edge. Thousands of miles an hour, a blue-gray ribbon suddenly streaks towards the open arms of heaven. The sky rumbles. Canada geese honk across the water, befuddle, and then a long trail of God's own cigar smoke is all that remains. It seems that the Hubble telescope was again in need of repair, and 3 astronauts were deployed with a bottle of Windex to go clean its mirrors. The infinite is smaller somehow. That's why I said, get a smaller glass. But you know, if you think about it, from up there, when you look down on it, Florida, where I just was, Florida itself might just look like this giant, limp tallywhacker hanging flaccid from the beast now known as the United States. But if you think about it, from that drooping Johnson, mankind ejaculates into the cosmos, shooting the seeds of the fountain of youth to swim the heavens in search of eternal creation. We have walked on the moon. Satellites do probe the galaxies. There is a fountain of youth. But it is a fountain of youth that has nothing to do with minoxidil, Viagra, or silicone breast implants. And as I thought about that, the fountain of youth, not the silicone breast implants, I found myself drifting back into consciousness in a swimming pool in St. Augustine, Florida, held afloat by a life-sized inflatable alligator. My Corona no longer ice cold, wondering, how do I interpret this dream? Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure reading for you. I believe the Baby Steel Club is next. I'm going to turn the stage back over to Jake Ward. Thank you.